So in this video, let's cover companion enhancements. That's this thing right here. You may notice it on your companion page. And it allows you to choose one of the following effects. All of them basically will increase or reduce your enemy's stats by a certain amount. All of them being the same amount, but depending on what the quality is of your active companion. For example, if we have a mythic companion, then it would have the stat of 7.5%. But if we were to have an epic companion instead, then the stat would just be 3.8%. And if you want to, let's say, unlock a companion enhancement, let's say you miss one, let's say we want dulled senses. How should we go about getting that? Well, you need to find companions. And for example, I can use this cat to give me dulled senses. And so I can go and equip this cat, binding it, and now it gives me the option to choose dulled senses. And you can see, since my active companion is mythic, the benefit from dulled senses is at its max of 7.5%, despite the companion not actually being on mythic. So you don't need to worry about that at all. You could have a grey companion and it'll still give you the maximum benefit as long as your active companion is mythic. So you can just simply go on your auction house, search your companions, and pretty much just right click them and see what they have. Like this guy, the 100 astral diamonds, I could buy them for dulled senses and I'll gain the maximum amount as long as I have a mythic companion summoned. So ultimately, I want to cover what are the best companion enhancements you should be using, whether you're a tank, DPS, or a healer. Now, you may look through them and there are certain ones which will reduce the enemy's stats. And by reducing the enemy's stats, you're actually going to increase everybody's damage against that target. So yeah, there are definitely some very good ones you want to have in your party so that everybody gains a damage boost against that enemy, especially in boss fights. So we'll cover those. But if you're a DPS player and just want to be stacking as much offensive stats as possible, so these 5, then there are some decent options. You can look through them here and you can see that you can increase your power and forte with impactful maneuvers, your forte with master of craft, your accuracy with perfect vision, your power with potency, your critical severity with potent precision, your critical strike with precision, and I believe that is about it with regards to the offensive stats that you want to be having. Oh, and yeah, you can get acute senses then, which we have slotted right now, giving you the combat advantage. But those are all self buffs, and the way they work is you have to actually be close enough to your companion. You can see up in your buff bar here we have acute senses, and let's say we go in combat here, we attack this dummy and we have our companion then attacking it. We can see we have the buff acute senses. It's not actually triggered. The way you note it's triggered, because it only will trigger on a chance, as you can see when you hit. So basically, if we just attack this tummy a bit more, there we go, it has triggered. We now have that acute senses, which boosts our combat advantage for 15 seconds. Now, what happens is if you go too far away from your companion, you can read it again from the tooltip, you have to be near to your companion to gain this buff. And the distance is 50 feet. So if I stand over here, you can see we don't get the buff. And there's no way we could activate it on the dummy because we're too far away. If we get this close, this is about 50 feet, then we can activate it. So keep in mind, you don't want to be staying at super range if you're running with a companion which is melee. So just be aware of that. And if you're running an augment, well, it'll just sit beside your side and that won't be an issue. So for a DPS player in general, you will just take something that will boost one of these 5 offensive stats. We don't have any companion enhancement that's going to boost your damage buffs, so that's not an option yet. Probably will happen at some point, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, it's just you take the one that fits your build best. Of course, prioritizing power, make sure you get that to 90%, then combat advantage, and then your crit strike and crit severity with accuracy last. Now, if you're a healer or a tank, I would highly recommend you run one of the 4. That would increase everybody's damage against the enemy. For example, armor break. You're basically reducing the enemy's defense, meaning you're increasing everybody's damage against the target. We go and attack this dummy right here, and you will notice when, again, it's a chance on a hit to trigger, that when it does trigger, you can see that little icon there just beside its HP bar, which shows the armor break effect is active, and it lasts 15 seconds, and then you can refresh it as well. So very reliable boost, and that's not just the only one there is. You also have your dulled senses, which reduces the enemy's awareness, and then you have your slowed reaction, and you have your vulnerability. And let's have a look at the math of those and what is the best one you should have, best two, let's say you're running with a tank and a healer, to have in your team. Or if you just have a trial and 4 supports, then you'd all be using one of them, because you can't just all run armor break, as the effect won't stack like that. Otherwise it's a bit broken and there wouldn't be any variety in the game. So we can look at armor break, and that gives overall about a 5.26% damage buff to everybody against the target. That's pretty good. That's reducing the enemy's defense. Then we have our dulled senses, which reduces the enemy's awareness, and this effectively increases our combat advantage and can go over the cap. You may have seen that when I mentioned like enforced threat, which gives 10% reduction to the enemy's awareness. That would also add to this. But with it just being the 7.5% and having no other debuffs like it, then you can see everybody would gain nearly a 4% damage gain against the target. Pretty neat then to stack armor break with this, gaining basically a 9% damage increase against the target just with those two effects. And that's generally what you would use if you're running with a tank and a healer, which is most of your dungeons, advanced dungeons, and so on. Only when you go to a trial do you maybe have 4 supports, and then you'd want more of the effects. And then you can see we have slowed reactions, which is not great, because all it does is it reduces the enemy's deflect chance. They normally have a 50% deflect chance, so when they deflect, they'll reduce your damage by the missing amount of your accuracy. And if you have capped accuracy at 90%, then deflects basically won't affect you. And then the enemy having that chance to deflect will basically have no gain. But if your accuracy is not capped and you still have a chance for the enemy to deflect, it will really heavily depend on your rating of accuracy. If it's at 60%, you could see you would gain a 2% damage boost. The more accuracy you have, the worse this effect becomes. So pretty terrible in my opinion to have slowed reactions unless everybody's running particularly low accuracy. And so finally we have vulnerability, which reduces the enemy's critical avoidance, which effectively increases our critical severity. Again, over the cap, you can get to like 97.5%. And that would give us a pretty solid 3.73% overall damage gain. Again, as long as you don't have other sources, which are also going to reduce the enemy's critical avoidance. So that's all 4 of them, and that's pretty much it. Right now, we don't have one that's going to reduce the enemy's deflect severity. Not that I'm aware of, but if we did, and when we do, it would be pretty useful. But again, it would depend how much accuracy you have. Like the lower amount of accuracy you have, the less this effect will be. If you only have like 40% accuracy, this becomes only a 3% overall damage gain. And that's average damage gain. So we can see with all of these benefits, we get this table and we can see we've ranked them then. What you want to be having, which gives the most damage to your party. So it's very simply armor break, dulled senses as the priority, and then vulnerability. And slowed reactions as like the last benefit if there is a 4th person who's not really running anything, who has a build who can fit one. Like 2% still something, but that 2% is reliant on people having 60% accuracy. And again, the more accuracy you have, the lower this effect is. And so those are the 4 debuffs we can put on the enemy in order for your entire party to deal that much more damage against them. It's not something you want to really miss out on when you're running endgame content. So just be aware of that. And hopefully this testing and this math shows you which ones you should prioritize in using for your team. Again, as a healer and a tank, you will generally have a build set up so that you don't need this enhancement here to like get the stats you need. You just use it to increase everybody's damage. That's the general rule of thumb and what you're kind of expected to do on your build when you're running endgame content these days. As for DPS, yes, they can go selfish and they can take one of the buffs, which is just going to increase their own stats, like acute senses for combat advantage and so on. So hopefully this was somewhat insightful to you guys. Again, the quick table here where you can refer to how much damage each of those benefits are going to give you. And if you're sorting people in a trial group, just make sure that you have one of each of these and no more. That way you can maximize everybody's damage. Massive thank you to all of these channel members, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.